I'm really excited to share with you today how any one of us can live a life of greater abundance and purpose when we live in a way that is totally aligned with who we really are as individuals. I think sometimes it can feel like we're living life on the difficult setting, like we're in a video game. We wake up early, we go to work, we slog it out, put in the hours, and then at the end of the month, we can look at our bank account and it's just not as full as we think it should be for all the work that we're putting in, right? I think every one of us is basically working as hard as we can, but we're not always seeing the abundance flowing in our lives the way that it might be flowing for other people around us. And I think that there's a very specific reason for this. It's not that you're not working hard enough. It's not that you're doing a good enough job. It's really because some people are working in a way that is aligned with who they really are and aligned with God or heaven. And there's some people who are not working in a way that is aligned. So someone's full effort is going in the right direction, but someone else's full effort is going in a direction that is just not working out quite the right way. And I feel like I'm an expert and I can speak on this because for more than 10 years, I was in a career that, I was okay at, and I put in the work, I did my best. But I just wasn't seeing all of the abundance flowing into my life the way that I expected it to, especially compared to some of the other people that were around me that I felt like I was as qualified as them. I was working as hard as them, but they kept getting all of these, opportunities and things happening for them in a way that just wasn't happening for me. Maybe you can relate to that in some kind of way. But it's really because when I was in this career, these people who were, getting ahead and they were doing great, it's because they were doing work that they totally loved and they were aligned with it. And when we're doing work that we're aligned with and that we love, well, then of course, more good stuff is going to come our way. Everything in life is energy. As we study quantum physics, we know this at the very rudimentary level of reality. We think that everything's really solid like this whiteboard, right? But it's not. If we zoom in and we get closer and closer and closer, we can see that the atoms are vibrating, the electrons are vibrating. As we go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into that, atomic rabbit hole, we find that everything is just like these strings that they're connected and it's quantum and everything's vibrating way faster than we can expect. And mostly everything is actually empty space, which is a really trippy idea. And if that's the case, if everything's energy, then we ourselves are also energy. And I'm going to talk about this. Watch me change the whiteboard. So if we know that everything in our universe is actually just a state of energy, then we can change the way that we interact with wealth and abundance in our own life. And we can sit in a frequency that brings that wealth to us a lot more easily. Think about an energetic system like you would a battery. And on any battery, there's a positive side and a negative side. There's always these polarities. And within the polarity, the energy always flows. So it flows from positive to negative, negative to positive. When those things are aligned, then the system's kicking, right? We can turn on the lights, we can turn on the camera. But if one of these is, switched to a negative, then the energy totally stops. And there can be no energy flowing without this polarity. So energy is always flowing from this positive polarity to the negative polarity, but it's also moving from a state of a higher frequency to a lower frequency. And this is kind of just what energy wants to do. And the ancient Jewish mystics, they studied something called Kabbalah. And within Kabbalah, they gave a very nice idea about how the universe is structured and how things work. And it actually lines up pretty closely with what scientists and quantum physicists think today. The idea is that on the highest end, where this vibrational frequency is the highest, everything exists in a state of oneness. So all people, all ideas, objects, structures are united. But when you're in that state, then it's kind of boring. Everything's before you. There can't be any creativity. There's not really time. So within Kabbalah, there's this structure that all of our souls go through where we kind of leave the oneness and we travel downward through matter. And as we travel downward, our frequency, our vibration comes a bit slower. It becomes a little more stretched out like that. So at the highest end is the idea of oneness. And then at the lower end, now all of a sudden we're in physical matter. And I think that's what's happening as our souls come from the kind of heavenly state and we come down to this physical state that we're in right now. We are spiritual beings having an earthly experience. But why are we having an earthly experience? It's because one, we need to learn and grow, but there's also like a wider reason for this. And it's because the universe, God wants to expand, it wants to create, it wants to diversify, and it wants to beautify. So you, who you are, existing in this life right now, you're an eternal being, but you have a very important purpose. And the purpose of your life is to be exactly who you are, and also to use your life as a creative act to do something that benefits the greater whole. So if we know that, like that's like the algorithm of life, right? How do you please this algorithm and get what you want out of it? It's because you need to be aligned with who you really are. When we are aligned, then the energy can start to flow again in our lives. And it starts to flow from a state of higher vibration to the lower vibration and back. In this kind of circular pattern. Within Kabbalah, they talked about the highest order is oneness. Then as you descend down into matter, you reach the realm of ideas. And like that makes sense, right? Before we can do anything, before we can have action and take an action to do something, maybe it's start a business, it could be start a play, whatever, right? But before we can do anything, we have to have it as an idea. And that idea ultimately comes from the oneness. So we go oneness, idea, and then it's an emotion. It's something that we feel and moves us and motivates us. And then we can finally take the action to make that thing a reality. And this is very, very, very important. The idea then is that whatever you're feeling in your body, whatever emotion that you're feeling is important. So if you feel an emotion within you that you need to create something, then you need to go create something. If you have an idea that comes to you about something you want to create, something you want to do, it doesn't matter what it is. That's coming from somewhere, and it's coming from this oneness. And the oneness is expecting you down here to act on it and to make it happen. And when you act on it, you're bringing something more beautiful to the world. And in doing so, you're starting this nice flow of energy, and you can start to see how everything good starts to happen in your life. Pretty easy, right? So we always want to be aligned with who we really are, right? We want to be able to meditate and go inside so we can understand our own emotions. We can connect with these ideas that are coming our way and this inspiration. And in doing that, we're kind of like sitting in the right place in this energetic system so that we can start to bring good things into our lives. So let's think about how this works kind of practically. There are people all over the world who are entrepreneurs. And when you're an entrepreneur, your purpose really is to create something new that benefits other people. It's a product or a service. It's something that creates value and brings greater, ease or comfort or something to the lives of people. But no entrepreneur can set out and do anything, right? Have an action to start their business unless the emotions are there moving them. They're going to feel some kind of thing within their body that's like, okay, I got to do this. I got to move on it. And then they have to have some kind of idea. And where do the ideas come from that an entrepreneur might start? Well, we don't really know, but it's almost like a mystical experience, right? They might just have an idea for how to improve something, create something new, and it starts to flow. And then as they do that, they bring this thing into action. Everybody starts to benefit from what they've done. And as they benefit, then the person receives more wealth into their life. And then you just roll it back and everything starts working out in a really cool way. The downside then is if you're one of those entrepreneurial people and you feel these ideas coming to your mind, you feel the emotions to do it, but then you don't take action, then you have stopped the flow of energy in the system and you're going to feel disconnected from yourself and your passion and who you really are. Not cool. And then when we're disconnected from this system, that's what some people call soul loss or the loss of self. When you feel the loss of self, there's none of that energy flowing within you. you're not being who you really are, you're not using your gifts to bring forth something good, then you can start to get depressed, anxious, fearful. You can start to feel like life is happening to you instead of you working co-creatively to make something cool happen in the world. So we don't want to do that. And if you're feeling that in your life right now, we're going to talk about how you can get out of it. So to get all of this energy moving in your life in the right way, you have to align with who you really are, which means you have to remember what are your spiritual gifts. And I think the important word here is remember. You have to remember who you really are. You have to remember in a way who you were when you were a kid, but you also kind of have to have this little remembering of who you were in the higher form before we descended into matter, into this life. And I believe, maybe you believe this too, that every person who's ever lived, you and me and everybody, is a spiritual being having an earthly experience so that we can learn and grow, share our gifts, and beautify the whole. And when we come down into this life, we come down with very specific spiritual gifts that we can use to benefit ourselves and others. And now we can't make a comprehensive list of every spiritual gift that is available to people, but there's so many, right? You can be compassionate, empathetic, understanding. You can be good at math, science, reading, physical, whatever, right? Everybody has totally different gifts. And that is what makes things beautiful. But our system and our society is set up in a way that the spiritual, unique gifts of people are not usually recognized or honored. So think about this. If you're like me, I remember being a kid in school, and I was pretty good at kind of just sitting there, doing my thing, reading my book. That aligned with my own spiritual gifts. But there were kids in my class, I remember, who were really interested in taking apart pens. They'd kind of like, twist the back of the pen off. They'd take off the tip, take off the spring, take off the eraser. They wanted to put all of the parts of the pen out on the desk and just check it out and see how it worked. They were tinkering with it. They were trying to figure out how this pen went together. And I remember one day when I was in class, this kid was doing this next to me. And the teacher came by and kind of got mad at the kid for doing that. They should have been focusing on their reading. They should have been focusing on their math. And instead, they were taking apart this pen to try to understand how it works. But when that kid was taking apart the pen, that was actually him engaging in a total alignment with who he really was, because he had this spiritual gift to understand how things are built. He could look at the pen, take it apart, put it back together, and it sparked his curiosity, right, of how other things are put together and how they work. And in life, man, we definitely need people who like to take things apart, put them back together, fix things, build things like that, and work with little instruments and objects. That's how all of our cars work. It's how our electronics work. I mean, everything, right? So when this kid is doing this gift and he's exploring it and curious about it, why does the teacher then feel the need to tell the kid that he needs to focus or do something else, right? It totally doesn't make sense at all. Or think about another kid in the class who, is kind of fidgety. They move a lot. They want to move their body. Well, maybe that kid has a gift, to play sports or to dance or to act or something like that. And if they follow that and they follow that passion, then they can create some kind of beautiful work, or they can engage in some kind of really physical, important activity. Like, who are we to say that that kid needs to just sit in his seat and keep doing the same thing that everybody else in the class is expected to do? It's not honoring the spiritual gifts of other people. So when we're like that, if we're one of those kids that's kind of scolded for exploring the things that they're really interested in, over time, we can kind of start to push our spiritual gifts down. We can forget who we really are. We forget, why we were interested in those things in the first place. Then we can go through school, we can go through life, and we can get into careers and things that, don't really suit our passions and are not aligned with who we really are. So already, as we get into our careers and everything, the energy is not flowing in our life. We're not bringing forth anything creative. So we can't see that abundance come into our life either. And that's very sad to me. And I hope that over time, we all kind of wake up, become more conscious, and start to realize that the gifts and everything that are within people is important from the get-go. So we don't have to be in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s and trying to remember who we actually are. But if you were someone who kind of pushed those passions down, That's okay. Right now, we want to figure out the first step of this process, which is how do we remember our gifts and try to figure out who we actually are once again? Because the first step to making the energy flow in our system, getting abundance going, is remembering our gifts and then acting on them. So we want to get all the energy flowing in our life because we want to have greater abundance and wealth coming to us. But we can't do that unless we're aligned in the system the right way. And to do that, we have to use our spiritual gifts that we brought down with us because they're important and we need to exercise them. So right now, I think you should just pause the video and just take a brief second to reflect and try to write down 3 or 4 things that you think might be your spiritual gifts. And I think this is kind of a little bit of a tough exercise. It's always harder to see our spiritual gifts within ourselves than it is to see within other people. I don't know why that is, but when we've kind of lived a life of pushing everything down for so long, it can feel uncomfortable or vulnerable to try to explore these things within us ourselves. So I'll be the first example of this because I want to prove to you that it's actually pretty easy to recognize your gifts and then move forward and use them. So for myself, I was in this career that, just didn't really suit me that well and things weren't rolling. And I had to take some time to try to remember what my spiritual gifts were. In doing that, I had to unlearn some things, right? I had to unlearn that I'm not really someone who's interested in building buildings. I'm not someone who's super interested in just sitting and going through spreadsheets all day. But what I think my gifts actually are is one is my ability to see people. I think I have a gift to see people for who they really are and to help them see that within themselves. And as I look back in time, that's actually something that a lot of my teachers and mentors and coaches, parents recognized me early on. They always said, "Hey, Tate, thank you for being a friend to our kid. Thanks for helping to see his best self." And that's a spiritual gift that maybe isn't rewarded in school or in the workplace directly, but that was really important for me to remember. Second thing that I had to remember for myself is that I have a passion for teaching. I like to learn, I like to read, and then I feel really fulfilled when I'm able to take some of these things that I've learned and I've read, be able to break them down in a way that other people can understand. But again, teaching's not something that's always rewarded in school quite the way that it should be. So I had to kind of remember that about myself. Third thing I'd say about myself is I had to remember my own sense of optimism. When I was a kid, people would always tell me that I'm pretty cheerful, pretty optimistic. At some point in life, I think as I was going through careers that didn't suit me, I lost that optimism just a little bit. And I had to remember that that is something that's core to me. And it's a gift that I can give to other people to help them say, hey, whatever you're going through in life, I know you can get through it. I know you can change and you can start to have a really cool life for yourself too. And these 3 things, kind of all tied together for me is what helped me realize that I need to start this channel and I want to do this work to start to help people grow and progress and align and bring abundance to their own life. For me, that felt like my calling or my purpose. And in looking at my spiritual gifts, I was able to figure it out. So that's just my example, but I'm really curious to know what it would be for you. And if you can remember some of these gifts that you have within yourself, don't be shy. Please go down into the comments and just drop 1 or 2 of them, because when you recognize your own gifts and you're confident to do it, it gives everybody else inspiration to do it as well. And we all need that. That's how we're going to build a better life and a better society. Once we've taken some time to recognize our gifts and try to put a name to them, the next step becomes how do we actually apply our gifts to do something meaningful and something that's aligned? And the trick here is once you've recognized your gifts, what you really need to do next is to go all out in them. Don't half-ass it. Don't just do it a little bit. But if you have something that you're really passionate about and you recognize what you're good at, you owe it to everybody to go all out when you do it. Don't dip your toes in. Don't just kind of half do it, but really engage with the work and get after it. I think one of the biggest reasons that people don't end up in alignment like this is out of fear. Fear comes because once we recognize these things about ourselves, they can feel kind of vulnerable. But when we start to act on them, then all of a sudden there's this pressure that comes from other people. They might see our gifts, they might make fun of them, or, they might judge us for what we're doing. And the fear ultimately is always a fear of failure. What if we go all out on our gifts? What if we pursue something and it doesn't work out? Then that kind of justifies that like our gifts were not that important to begin with. Maybe they don't have value. Maybe they don't have meaning, but that's just totally not true, right? We can have that perspective, but that perspective is a very limiting belief. Again, it puts in our head that we're not in control of our own reality, or that reality is always something that happens to us. If we're inspired, if we have gifts, if we're passionate about a particular thing, we owe it to ourselves and others to go forth and do it. You might think that what you're interested in and what you're inspired by is not that important, but I promise you that it is. It can be something big or small or whatever. But if it's something that's moving you, that's important because it's moving the oneness or the wholeness of the whole earth. And you never know that what you're inspired in might just grow into something really big or meaningful. I gave this example in another video, but when Albert Einstein was young, he was really inspired by this compass. And his dad gave him the compass when he was sick in bed one day. When he looked at the compass, he just could not figure out, how is that needle always pointing north? And it sparked this curiosity in him to study physics and math and science. And from this little thing that Albert Einstein was able to look at, he just worked by himself quietly in his desk one day, and then boom, ultimately came up with the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics. And it's all just because he followed his gifts and his passion, and he did what moved him. So whatever you feel called to do, truly, 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 it is coming from God. It's coming from the source, and you got to do it. Don't be fearful. Just go after it. And if you feel a little fearful of going after it, then just drop me an email or a DM, and I want to encourage you and get you moving on the path, because it's so important that you do it. When you do it, then you're in alignment, and all of that wealth and that goodness can start to come to you, and it can come to everybody else as well. But very important to do this and go all out. Let the fear go. You got this. But it's tricky because when you step out into that new space, it really becomes like an act of faith, right? You're going out of your comfort zone. You're going to the place where you're tested and you need to learn and grow. And I think sometimes when we get older and older in our lives, we're not always pushed to grow, try new things in the way that we were when we were young. And as you get older and older, it can feel more and more intimidating to do that. It's because our brains kind of build these neurological structures and these patterns and these frameworks that, we lose this plasticity and we lose the ability to change and form new ideas. So it's a little bit uncomfortable, but once you can get through that stage and you can get up and going, man, everything's going to get easier and easier and easier. You have to build momentum. And in this, I like to call it the spiritual momentum, right? Because you're exercising your spirit, you're exercising your gifts. And that's a really, really cool thing to do. So please do it. Third thing we need to do after we recognize our gifts, we're going all out on it. And this is probably the hardest part. We have to forget about the outcome. We have to forget about the outcome of our work. All we can do is engage as purposefully and as mindfully as possible with what it is we're interested in and exercise our gifts. And then we have to forget about how all of that abundance is actually going to come into our lives. There's a reason for this, right? It's because our minds were a little bit limited in the way that we can think and process. We can't see that whole, that high to low, and how all of the universe and the tapestry forms. So we don't really know what opportunities are going to come to in our lives, even a couple months into the future, right? And when we start to live a life of total alignment, well, it's like we're really shaking up the dust. We've been living a life that is kind of just default for a long time. But when we change it, man, everything's going to shake, everything's going to get cleaned out. And it's going to be kind of a rough awakening for yourself and for a lot of the people around you, right? It's this big transformational process. So as we're going through this, one of the best things that you can do is you don't really need to tell anybody about it. Just go through it on your own. Because if you start to tell other people about it, they can start to bring more fear and doubt into your life and to tell you oh, you can't really change. You're not really good enough. Your gifts aren't really all that. And they may say that, but what they're actually saying is they're coming from a place of fear. And the fear that they're feeling is that they're living in kind of a default life. They're not exploring their gifts. They're not exploring their passions. And so they can start to feel a little bit threatened by you and what you're doing. And so, of course, they want to try to pull you down because what you're doing is like you're shaking up the dust. It's making everybody uncomfortable. And ultimately, it's good, but better as you go through this, just kind of keep it to yourself, right? And then forget about the outcome. You don't know how all of that wealth and that abundance and that goodness is going to come to you. When you're starting a new business, for example, and I'm just using that because it's very clear, like you don't really know who your customers are going to be. You don't know what your final product's going to be. You don't know if it's going to be like 3 months before it takes off, a year, 2 years, whatever. You don't know the journey, but that's part of it. But as you go through that process, if you're aligned with who you are and you're really passionate about it, things are going to work out. If it's not working out, it's probably because you're not really aligned and doing the right thing. I have full confidence, full faith that when you are acting as you are really meant to be, everything is going to come to you. Everything is going to be great. But you have to forget about it. And that's kind of like a counterintuitive thing. Because if you're hyper focusing on just one particular outcome, like let's say that you are a dancer, for example, and you want to get some kind of cool dancing gig. If you're focused on just like one particular thing that you want to get, then all of your attention starts to focus on it and it can collapse all of the opportunities that are possible within this wider energetic system. And it might be that maybe you don't get that thing that you've been hyper fixating on, but there might be something else coming your way that's even better for you that you just don't have like the vision to see yet. So when you allow yourself to forget about the outcome and just engage in the work that you really want to do, then you open up yourself for all the abundance and the cool opportunities that can flow and come your way. I'm feeling that right now as I'm building out this YouTube channel. I don't really know how it's all going to work, but I know that I'm using my own gifts. I'm going all in on it. And then I know that like the outcome that's going to come out of it is going to be sweet. Like I'm going to connect with people that I never thought I'd connect with before. This channel might grow and evolve in ways I didn't expect, but that's all part of it. And I just know, hey, I'm aligned in the system and everything's going to work out. And I know it's going to work out for you too with whatever it is that you decide to do. So you got this. Go for it. Dig in. Try to remember what your gifts are. Go all out in them. And then just forget about the outcome and everything's going to come your way. All the abundance, all the goodness is going to start to flow to you. I know that's true. I've seen it in my own life and I've seen it in the lives of so many people that I've had the opportunity to coach over the last year or so. It's a fact. Energy's real. The system's real. And hey, you got this. So before we go, just consider hitting subscribe. I'd love to have you on the channel. I'm trying to grow it and I'm trying to get this information out to as many people as possible because I think it can change a lot of lives. I'm Tate Arnold and this is Oversoul. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Have a good day.